Well, it's around about Halloween time right now, and I'm on that video game that I talked about. I'm going to talk about something that goes back at least 35 to 40,000 years old. It's an idea of hunting that people have had going on, well, hunting from way back when. Our modern form of this, or when I say modern form, it's still our ancient form of it, believe it or not. But our modern form ends up having horses in it and so on. But the version before that just had dogs, which we're seeing right here and we're having to kill off. And whoa, they're all over me. I'm turning red and almost dead. Okay, let's just go ahead and release and go back to the campfire and come out. So this is a trial. So it's a 5-man run, but it's an open thing, not like a dungeon. And so they refer to it as a trial. There are 10-man trials too. We've advanced to the second clearing. But in this, there is a witch, which you see on the right side coming in there, and she's giant. And there was also an ogre and so on. And these are tropes that were actually part of the original tale. Get out of the trees here. There's the ogre. And then there's these little quicklings, those little guys that were right there that were fighting. They're much smaller than us. Something you would think of as a hobbit or a halfling. But lo and behold, they were called quicklings. And they have little Phrygian red caps on. And in the older version of this area, well, not this area, but the area that they are associated with, there was Stonehenge monuments and so on, and I've shown that before in the past. Now, there's that witch again. So now we killed her again. Well, there's another one right back there too. See that? So there's the 3 Stygian witches, if you will, or whatever you want to put together to end up forming something that makes coherent sense out of this. And you can see those dogs running around. There's a giant spider, and that has to do with this. So, you know, it's very Halloweeny. But then again, if you really think about this mythology, there's a lot of it that is, and that's because it's the mythologies that came out of this. Now this seems to come back for a time before time. Now we've got a guardian area, and then we fight the major bad guy, who is known as the master of the hunt. It's like Masters of the Beast or whatever, but in the original tale, I guess I should get onto that, they had this idea that if you hear this wild hunt ride by, and this is something that was found and shown in the Witcher series, but there's a lot of times that is like this. People have made the comments that the wraith riders, there's the master of the hunt right there. And you can see he's got that crown but made of antlers, right? And they found those crowns made of antlers to go with sacred hunts and so on. So it ought to make more sense. But you gotta fight this guy. I'm gonna throw out my T-Rex on him here and go to town. And here's the dogs that you have to get past. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Gigi. How did I place here? I placed second place, but that's because I'm talking and screwing up. I even died one time on the very first part of it and couldn't get my crap out. I'll go ahead and keep that. So it's Halloween time, so let me go back to the main buildings and area and the main place here, I guess, to talk about this more. But in this idea, this is the wild hunt. And people even said that Tolkien's idea of the wraiths and the guys that come after him is like the wild hunt. Now in this wild hunt, you would hear wind start whistling around, and you'd hear trumpets or horns off in the distance quite often, and the screeching of animals, which you figure out later are horses. and the barking of dogs and so on, and people yelling. And as this thing comes by you, you actually notice that they're the undead. And you might even recognize some of these people. And they're riding in a great hunt, chasing something at that time. Well, in the Ancient of Tales, there's a bear that's involved with that. And most of us know that the Little Dipper is, other than the Little Dipper, is actually, or Big Dipper and Little Dipper are bears. That's Mama Bear and the regular baby bear situation. And this has to do with it. In fact, they pick out stars in that and they say this is a people, or this is this, or these are the dogs trying to encircle it. And if you look, one of the stars there are a little bit more reddish tone, and in doing so, that's apparently the one that they're after, and it's already got an arrow in it. Now they're trying to chase it down. But it turns into a tale of death. And what happens to you is, if you see the wild hunt, quite often you become a part of the wild hunt. Have you ever seen that show with Legend with Tom Cruise, where it's all back in the thing? That girl, Lily, that he takes in, and he's supposed to be a Satan type of guy or whatever, he takes her in, and then she starts to do this dance with this faceless mannequin type thing, and then embraces it. Whenever she does, she becomes that persona and starts to come out to do it. Well, that type of thing happens to you if the great hunt comes by. So they steal you off and they take you on to the dead, and it was a way to answer of somebody that died in a weird way, or an offhand way also, if you follow me. A lot of these ideas of Halloween, though, seem to stem back real far in time, too. Amazingly, whenever I was a kid, they told you that Halloween was some kind of druidic thing that people had already forgotten, that the candy manufacturers puffed back up so they can end up selling candy, and now it's just a bunch of kids going around trying to scare each other. Does that sound familiar to y'all? Yeah, well then whenever you look into it, you'll find out this has great depth to it. And in fact, the days of Halloween are the same for so many cultures around the world, even the Aztec and Mayans and so on, and it ends up showing you a connection from the Wayback Machine. And people have made the comment that with this level going on here, it must be something that's significant, that everybody witnessed an event or something going on. They track it back and they go, you know, it comes to the end of the last ice age, and I don't know if I lost it there or what's going on. Then we come to find out, well, the end of the last ice age was the Younger Dryas event. It has to do with comets. If you look up here, you'll see the moon, and it looks like it's just been recently hit by something, and there's a large amount of refuge trail coming off of it, almost making it into a comet. You can see that, right? And while the moon, you can just look at it and see all the things that have literally gone right over our shoulder and hit it straight. So whenever they talk about how, oh, these things protect us, it's not too much. You take a ball on a string and whip it around and try to save yourself from being shot. See if that's going to work. Just like whenever they claim that, you know, Jupiter and Saturn, and they take and yank these planets in and so on. You know, that only works if they're right in the place, right in the spot, right in the right amount of time. If they're circled around on the other side, they'll never even have a chance to interact with it. Whoopsie. And in fact, there are times whenever things won't become trans-Neptune objects that become it because of their concentrations pulling it in and then letting it go on by. But the Younger Dryas event appears to be this Day of the Dead that everybody corresponded. And it came down through time in a large furrow of things to end up what we have today as a sign of a harvest, and the jack-o'-lanterns and all these things about witches and ghosts and goblins, which I've done other videos about in the other years, talking about Halloween. But the amazing thing is, it seems to trope back exactly to this point where everybody's got this idea that it falls. Even in the Aztecs, they have drawing depictions of these star fallings and everything, and they talk about these golden hairs or these red hairs that fall, and that's actually meteor strikes that go on. And so why do people correlate the two together? Well, it looks kind of like what they talked about happened of a comet coming and breaking up and hitting the earth, but it's much less worse. It's just the little remnants that we have left of it whenever we run into the torrid meteor shower right here around Halloween. And in fact, those 3 days of Halloween, the 31st, and November 1st and 2nd are the same, which people have noticed this a long time ago, of course, in the Bible and stuff, and them adopting other holidays into it as being All Saints Days. But Halloween was All Hallows Eve, and so we have to make that correlation too, that it was connected to them, and then the Bible tried to take that on too. It's like they kind of did Easter and stuff, but in that effect, this had been going on a long time, and so they wanted to group themselves with it. But when you look into the depth of it and how long it's been going on, it's been going on for some 10,000 years or more here, already at this point here. And though we have jack-o'-lanterns and to scare off the dead and the ghosts that walk the earth and so on, let me just say it distinctly out. If there were any ghosts that walk the earth, and 1 in a million really made a ghost, after all this time and the billions of people, everybody'd see them walking around like crazy. Yeah, it would be just like trick-or-treaters, but instead it would be ghostly apparitions. Strangely, an apparition is also another name for a comet's vision whenever people find that. I saw an apparition in the sky, Quite often it hooks up to that. But this idea of a wild hunt that we started with, this is something, it's a hunting trope that goes along with it, and then you can become part of the wild hunt. And it's got a bunch of variations on a theme from it, and they've realized that there's a differential in theme from like the Bell Beaker people that came through, and then the later Anglo-Saxons and so on. There's another variation. And you'll see ideas of the hunt, and it talks about Odin and how he's hooked up with it, and or Wodenaz, even from preemptive to that, back when they were still Proto-Indo-Europeans before coming into that. But his name just signifies that he is a master type thing too, and they say well, it goes back farther than that. After doing a full track down, they say 35, 40,000 years ago, perhaps longer. And then before that, they realized there was probably tropes that led up to them changing it into that story that still has essences in the soup that we still consume today. When you hear about these, just like you hear about dragon stories and all that type of thing, this wild hunt idea, and even through the time of the Wild West and people on horses and everything, this all used to be talked about. This was something that people said it really happened. One of the most famous times is a priest, where he relayed to somebody that he saw the wild hunt right near him one time. So this is something that was passed down even by clergy and things like that, and this idea too. So it's a strange thing. I've made commentary towards a few videos by this guy named Creganford, and if you look him up in Creganford, the Wild Hunt, you'll probably see 4 or 5 videos about it. But looking into it, he goes all very much into the depth of the way it comes from, different forms of it, different tropes that get introduced and things like that over time, and that they realize it traces back to something that's this old. There are other times that him and this group of people that are all doing this investigations have found certain stories and tropes, some of them are into your Bible idea and so on, are going back tens of thousands of years. So it's pretty neat to look at this and be able to look back at it and things, and well, Halloween and its connection to the torrid meteor storm, that's a connective towards the Day of the Dead whenever we lost so many people. People don't realize there was an extreme Y bottleneck of all of humanity and all animals Sure, you know that we lost the mammoths and the this, that, and the other. No, there was a lot of extremely large animals, and if they were still around, it'd be a totally different world than it is today. It changed it, and it made a brand new world, kind of like in that Aztec Mayan idea of a brand new world and things like that that they quite often talk about. But how far does Halloween go back? It's one of those ones that goes to a point and it really dies. And again, it dies off of these Proto-Indo-European people that kept it as a mythology and pushed it on through. And there were others that came with the idea of a jack-o'-lantern, like you see in the background, that used to be a turnip or an onion type thing that people did, and it would look like somebody's eyes and in the distance and so on. And this was really a protective thing. You look at it as scary, but just like in the old Exorcist movie, that thing that they turn on Pazuzu was supposed to protect your children from the creatures like Lilith and so on that try to steal away your children, or crib death and ideas like that. It was a protector deity. It was you invoking actual demons that were so good they scared off the actual demons that you were worried about. Or we could just change that whole word to angels or anything we want to, and fallen angels or this, that, and the other, and try to make it off into a different trope. But it's still kind of trapped under that idea. And this, of course, goes all with harvest and so on. And then we have a Thanksgiving, because after that point we make it through it. I could go into depth in this, guys, but you know, one of the things too is November 17th is a peg also, and that's another meteor shower that comes in that other people had during the same time, given an idea. And so these two dates hooked up with meteor showers are incredible. Just like they do hit us earlier in the year at June, but whenever that happens, it's coming from the sun, and so you don't see it. This allowed for ideas like Phaethon and his chariot gone wild, and it also allows for things like the Tunguska event, and they said it actually came out of the sun. Some people reported it as it sprouted off a little baby and it came after us because it came from the sun. But whenever it's doing the other time, and we're just basically in this car here flying by, and we're about to run into some bugs that are right near a street light. And it's pretty cool to run through the bugs, but if we ever run into the chunk of that street light, it's going to be ha ha ha. No, it's not going to be ha ha ha. It's believed that there are thousands of 100 to a 1,000 foot, so multiple football field size or football stadium size rocks in all of this. And while the majority of the sprinkles that we see that are something like this up here and just kind of sprinkles hanging off his tail, you don't realize it from here, but those slight chunks that you see, those are way bigger than any football stadium. And it left a trail much like this, and we run through this thing twice a year. And if we run through the wrong place, we're liable to have something bad happen. But this all traces back to a time whenever all of this happened, and people correlate it to that. And you hear the idea of the Sumerian belt of stars and so on. So I'll just go on with this, but it's where all this idea comes from. Yeah, and there are a lot of other things, and I've got other videos about them, like where do vampires come from? How about the idea of Frankenstein's monster? How about this, werewolves and so on? Yeah, that's got to do with sacred geometry, numbers of the moon hooked up to silver and all kinds of stuff. It's why they're Bane, but it's also man going to a wild point. And there were people just like the Wild Hunt that used to do that into a wolfen idea. Yeah, like a berserker situation, but I guess that's for another video. Anyhow, scarecrows, that's just a fake man standing out in the field scaring off birds from eating your grain that you're growing. Oh, that turned into a whole lot of things. Jesus Christ pose right there, huh? Anyhow, guys, let me know what you think down below. Peace.